In a quiet town wrapped in ordinary routines, a chilling truth lurked beneath the surface, one that no one dared to imagine until it was too late. The hook of this story begins with a single disappearance, an event so subtle that most brushed it off as a misunderstanding, a late night gone wrong, or someone simply choosing to walk away. But behind the missing posters fluttering on street poles and the desperate social media pleas from families begging for any scrap of information, there was a growing fear, a whisper among the community that something far more sinister was happening. Each unexplained absence felt like a piece of a puzzle no one yet understood, a dark pattern hiding in plain sight. And as more people vanished without a clue, the sense of dread thickened, settling over the town like a fog that refused to lift. Neighbors began locking their doors earlier. Mothers called their children home before dusk. And even the police, once confident and dismissive, found themselves out of explanations. The intro unfolds as we step deeper into the heart of this mystery, peeling away layers of denial and fear to reveal a truth no one was ready to face. Families recount the last moments they saw their loved ones, a smile at the doorway, a routine walk to the store, a casual drive out of town. Nothing strange, nothing alarming, just normal life until silence swallowed everything. The town's serenity became a mask, hiding the presence of a calculated predator who watched, waited, and chose victims with chilling precision. As frustrated families pushed for answers, a few stubborn investigators and relentless advocates began connecting threads others refused to see. Their suspicions sparked the first spark of clarity, hinting at the presence of a hidden monster moving freely through their lives. This was no coincidence. This was no ordinary disappearance. The vanished were part of a much darker story, one that would force the whole community to confront the terrifying possibility that evil had been living among them all along. It began with a single vanishing that almost no one took seriously. On a warm, early summer evening, 18-year-old Mara Ellison left her part-time job at a local cafe, waving goodbye to her coworkers with the same cheerful smile she wore every day. She took the same route she always walked, a quiet stretch of road shaded by overgrown oak trees and lit only by occasional street lamps that hummed faintly in the dusk. When her mother realized she hadn't returned home, she assumed Mara had stopped by a friend's house. An hour passed, then two. Midnight arrived, and every call went unanswered. That was when the first seed of fear took root. But when the police were notified the next morning, the response was painfully predictable. She's probably just blowing off steam. Maybe she ran away. Give it 48 hours. For Mara's family, those 2 days felt like an eternity, filled with frantic searching, tearful conversations, and the agonizing silence of a phone that refused to ring. Flyers were printed and taped to telephone poles. Social media posts were shared. But despite the growing panic in her mother's voice and the trembling certainty that something terrible had happened, Mara's case remained low priority. After all, disappearances like this didn't usually mean danger, at least not in a small town where everyone trusted the familiar. Yet beneath that complacency, something ominous was stirring. Witnesses later recalled seeing a car pulled over near the road that night, a model they couldn't quite remember, a driver whose face they couldn't describe. A fleeting detail dismissed at the time, but it would become the first thread in a deadly pattern. Mara didn't run away. She didn't choose to vanish. She was taken, and her disappearance marked the quiet beginning of a nightmare no one yet understood. In the weeks following Mara's disappearance, the town tried to restore its rhythm, but it couldn't shake the uneasy tremors beneath the surface. Rumors spread through high school hallways, grocery store aisles, and church parking lots, each whisper punctuated by nervous glances over shoulders. Mothers walked their children to school instead of letting them take the bus. Teens avoided the wooded shortcuts they once embraced. Even the easy familiarity between neighbors began to crack, replaced by suspicion so subtle it barely had a name. Then another disappearance occurred. This time, It was 42-year-old Alan Price, a quiet mechanic who rarely left town. His truck was found parked beside an abandoned trail. Keys still in the ignition, radio still playing. No note, no signs of struggle, just absence. The police insisted there was no connection, claiming Alan's case was unusual but not alarming. Yet the community felt the shift immediately. Fear had taken root, and it was no longer silent. Local news began covering the disappearances, initially as isolated tragedies, but soon questioning the coincidence of two vanishings so close together. Families demanded answers at town meetings, their voices cracking with desperation and anger. Officers reassured them with practiced calm, but behind closed doors, pressure mounted. Something was happening, something they could no longer ignore. Meanwhile, online forums lit up with speculation. People created maps of last known locations, circled suspicious areas, and shared theories that ranged from criminal rings to supernatural explanations. The conversations often spiraled into fear-mongering, but hidden among the noise were the first public acknowledgments. These disappearances were not random. For those who knew Mara and Alan, the truth felt painfully obvious. Someone was hunting. Someone was watching. And the town, once peaceful and predictable, was now a place where every shadow felt like a warning, and every unsolved disappearance hinted at the same unseen presence lurking just beyond the edges of daily life. By the third disappearance, denial was no longer an option. 26-year-old Danielle Harper vanished after her evening jog near the old quarry road. Her smartwatch tracking route ended abruptly at a blind corner, and though her friends insisted she never strayed from her routine, the police still hesitated to assume foul play. But this time, the town refused to stay silent. With each new case, eerie similarities began to reveal themselves. The victims vanished along secluded routes, near wooded areas, or at the edge of town where streetlights flickered inconsistently. All disappearances occurred shortly after sunset, during that fragile hour when daylight dies and shadows stretch longer than they should. A small group of volunteers began reviewing timelines, documenting patterns, creating a shared folder of every detail they could gather. The more they analyzed, the more unsettling the discoveries became. Traffic cameras caught glimpses of a dark-colored vehicle lingering near two of the disappearance sites. A few locals recalled seeing a man just standing there, observing quietly from a distance. One woman claimed she heard footsteps behind her days before Danielle vanished, but when she turned around, no one was there. Fear transformed into obsession. People studied their surroundings with newfound vigilance, jumping at the sound of snapping twigs or approaching footsteps. But the most disturbing revelation came from a retired detective who had lived in the town for decades. He noted that similar disappearances had occurred nearly 20 years earlier, cases long dismissed, considered unrelated, or brushed off as runaways. It seemed the pattern wasn't new. It was resurfacing. The darkness wasn't growing. It was returning. Someone had been hunting here before. Someone who knew the landscape intimately. Someone methodical, patient, and visible. And now they were back. As fear escalated and theory swirled, suspicion began shifting toward the unlikeliest places, the familiar faces that blended seamlessly into everyday life. The town had always prided itself on being close-knit, but paranoia has a way of reshaping even the closest communities. People scrutinized their neighbors, coworkers, and even longtime friends. And slowly, a chilling idea took hold. What if the monster they feared wasn't an outsider, but someone among them? The investigation took a decisive turn when a young journalist named Clara Vance began digging deeper into the background of certain individuals who were consistently near the disappearance sites. One name surfaced repeatedly, a local handyman named Robert Hales. Friendly, quiet, always helpful. He fit the mold of someone no one would ever suspect. He fixed fences, repaired roofs, helped elderly residents with errands. But Clara's research revealed inconsistencies, gaps in his work history, vague explanations for his whereabouts on crucial nights, and an unsettling tendency to appear in photos or surveillance footage near search sites. When asked casual questions, he always had easy answers too easy. Volunteers noted that Robert often showed up at community gatherings with a disarming smile and thoughtful advice, yet seemed strangely invested in following the investigation's progress. Though no evidence directly tied him to any crime, the unease surrounding him grew. People recalled moments that, in hindsight, seemed off. A stare held too long, a comment delivered too softly, a presence felt but never questioned. Clara knew better than to accuse without proof, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Robert wasn't just watching the investigation. He was studying it. And if he truly was involved, then he wasn't just hiding in plain sight. He was playing along, moving through the town like a ghost who already knew how the story would end. As the disappearances multiplied, the public's patience crumbled under the weight of fear and frustration. Families of the vanished had pleaded with authorities from the beginning, but each warning, each gut-driven concern, was met with calm dismissal. The police force wasn't malicious. They were simply unprepared, understaffed, and clinging to the belief that their town was too safe for such crimes. That belief became their fatal blind spot. Crucial reports were misplaced. Witness statements sat unreviewed for days. An early tip about a suspicious vehicle was never circulated. When Danielle's smartwatch data went missing from the official case file, the community's trust in law enforcement shattered completely. Public meetings grew heated, with grieving families demanding accountability. Frustration turned to outrage, and outrage turned into the painful realization that the system designed to protect them had failed in the worst possible way. Among the loudest voices was Mara's mother, whose grief had transformed into a relentless drive for justice. She gathered others, forming an unofficial victims alliance, an organized group dedicated to finding answers when authorities could not or would not act. They shared documents, coordinated searches, and pressured the police with every new lead they uncovered. Their determination exposed a deeper issue. The disappearances were not only the result of a cunning predator, but also a series of missed opportunities that had allowed the monster to operate freely. Every gap in communication, every prematurely closed case, every assumption of a runaway provided cover for the predator. And each failure created more victims. The community's trust had eroded, but something else had taken its place, a unified resolve. If the authorities couldn't stop this monster, the families and citizens would uncover the truth themselves, no matter the cost. After months of collecting fragments of clues, dead ends, and faint leads, the breakthrough arrived from an unexpected place. During a community-led search along an overgrown trail near the quarry, a volunteer stumbled upon a small, mud-covered necklace one identified as belonging to Danielle. It wasn't much, but it was enough to prompt a more extensive search of the area. Within hours, investigators unearthed boot prints buried beneath layers of leaves and disturbed soil near a makeshift path leading deeper into the woods. The pattern of the treads was unusual custom, almost handmade, like something crafted rather than purchased. Clara, the journalist, recognized the design from a photo she'd taken earlier of Robert Hales repairing a fence in town. His boots matched the imprint perfectly. The evidence was circumstantial, but combined with the growing pattern, it was the strongest lead they had. Investigators, under renewed pressure, dug deeper. A search warrant for Robert, his home, revealed unsettling items. A map with marks near disappearance sites, an old radio scanner tuned to police frequencies, and personal belongings that didn't belong to him. None of it proved guilt, but every piece strengthened a narrative forming around him. When questioned, Robert remained calm, almost practiced. He claimed he used the scanner to stay informed during volunteer search efforts. The map? He said he marked areas he helped repair for the town. His demeanor never cracked, but for the first time, the masks seemed thin, fragile. The breakthrough sparked something powerful: momentum. The community felt it. Investigators felt it. And the monster, for the first time, felt the walls closing in. The hunt was no longer directionless. They had a suspect. They had evidence. And they were closer than ever to revealing the truth behind the vanished. Evidence can be silent, but it can also speak louder than any witness. As investigators sifted through the items found in Robert's home, patterns emerged that revealed the haunting stories of the victims in a way only physical evidence could. Among Robert's possessions was a small collection of trinkets, rings, hair ties, keychains, each catalogued and hidden in a wooden box. At first glance, they appeared meaningless, but when families were brought in, the truth shattered the room's composure. One by one, relatives identified them as belongings of the vanished. Mara's silver dove necklace, Alan's key fob, Danielle's bright yellow hair tie she never went jogging without. These items were no accident. They were trophies. Each piece brought a painful clarity to families, confirming what they had feared. Their loved ones didn't disappear voluntarily. They were taken. The emotional weight of these discoveries added urgency to the investigation. Forensics began analyzing the objects, discovering traces of soil, plant fibers, and microscopic elements that matched areas deep within the forest. The victims, though voiceless, were guiding investigators toward the truth. Clara documented every new discovery, ensuring the community stayed informed. Her reporting shifted from speculation to revealing a horrifying timeline of abuse, abduction, and control. Meanwhile, the victims' families found themselves torn between grief and determination. The objects provided answers, but they also reopened wounds that had barely begun to scar. Each recovered item was a reminder of laughter lost, stories unfinished, and futures that would never unfold. In the midst of this emotional storm, investigators pressed on, piecing together the victims' final movements. Every clue brought them closer to understanding the monster's routine, habits, and hunting grounds. The vanished were gone, but through evidence, through the fragments they left behind, they spoke clearly, and their voices demanded justice. Once the evidence began pointing consistently toward the woods, the investigation took on a new, darker dimension. A task force organized a meticulous sweep of the forest, dividing the region into grids and searching inch by inch. The terrain was rugged, tangled with roots and brush, and eerily silent, almost as if the landscape itself held its breath. It was during one of these sweeps that officers discovered a narrow, concealed path, barely noticeable unless one knew to look. The path wound downward into a hollow surrounded by steep ridges, forming a natural bowl hidden from view. At the center, they found a decaying shed, its boards warped and rotting, its windows blackened with dirt. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood, rusted metal, and something far more unsettling. Officers located ropes tied to support beams, a rusted table with deep grooves carved into its surface, and remnants of torn fabric. The most chilling discovery was a patch of disturbed earth behind the shed, covered with branches and loose soil. A forensic team began excavation, revealing shallow graves containing the remains of multiple victims. Silence fell over the forest as investigators and volunteers alike realized what they had uncovered: the monster's lair. This was where the vanished had been taken. This was where they spent their final moments. The findings sent shockwaves across the town. Vigils were held. Families collapsed under the weight of confirmed tragedy. And yet, the discovery also ignited a fire, a determination to bring the monster to justice. The forest had guarded its secrets well, but now the truth was laid bare. Whoever had created this hidden lair was no ghost, no myth. He was real, calculating, and terrifyingly close. And somewhere out there, he knew they had found a sanctuary. With the lair uncovered and evidence mounting, authorities launched one of the largest manhunts the town had ever seen. Officers scoured the woods, drones hovered overhead, and roadblocks were set up along every major route. Panic swelled as rumors spread that the monster might attempt to escape, or worse, strike again. Robert Hales, now the prime suspect, had vanished from his home hours before the warrant was executed. Neighbors reported seeing him loading his truck late at night, moving with a sense of urgency masked by eerie calm. It was clear he knew investigators were closing in. Clara became instrumental in tracking his movements, using her network of contacts to obtain sightings from nearby towns. She traced his path to remote backroads and abandoned cabins he had once repaired for seasonal residents. Meanwhile, specialized trackers analyzed his habits and predicted where he might go next. They concluded he was not fleeing blindly. He was moving with purpose towards somewhere familiar, perhaps another hiding place or a location tied to past crimes. The tension built as night fell, and officers surrounded an abandoned ranger station deep in the forest. A faint light flickered inside, and a silhouette moved behind the broken windows. Commands were shouted. Officers advanced. A shot echoed through the trees. After a brief standoff, Robert emerged, hands shaking, sweat streaking down his face. His eyes revealed nothing, not remorse, only the hollow emptiness of a man whose secret world had finally collapsed. He was taken into custody without further resistance, though the air felt poisoned with the possibility that he might have more secrets buried in the woods. The hunt was over, but the terror he unleashed would linger long after his capture. With Robert in custody, the community braced for the long process of uncovering the full truth. Interrogations were grueling, revealing fragments of his motives but never the complete picture. He offered vague explanations, claims of compulsion, memories blurred by time, excuses that sounded rehearsed. But investigators focused on recovering facts, not understanding the mind of a monster. Teams searched additional areas he identified, discovering more personal belongings of victims and confirming additional crimes previously unknown. Families who had lived years in uncertainty finally received answers, though the truth offered little comfort. In court, the evidence spoke louder than any testimony. The trinkets, the gravesite, the maps, and the DNA results constructed a narrative so clear and devastating that the courtroom sat in stunned silence. Victims' families delivered impact statements that filled the room with tears, anger, and the haunting weight of lives stolen. Robert was sentenced to multiple life terms without the possibility of parole. Yet, even as justice was served, the town struggled to heal. Trauma had left its mark. Empty chairs at dinner tables, birthdays never celebrated. A community that once lived without fear now carried the shadows of what had happened. Still, hope took shape in small ways. A memorial erected in the victim's honor, support groups formed for grieving families, and new safety measures implemented to prevent future tragedies. Clara's documentary brought national attention to the case, ensuring the victims would never be forgotten. And in the quiet moments after the storm, the town began to rebuild, not by forgetting the vanished, but by honoring them. The monster had been exposed, but their memory would shine brighter than the darkness he created. In the end, as the final echoes of courtroom doors faded and the monster was locked away, the town was left standing in the quiet aftermath of a nightmare it never saw coming. The story of the vanished was no longer a mystery, no longer a collection of unanswered questions. Now it was a haunting truth that would forever shape the identity of everyone who lived through it. Families who had waited years for answers finally had names, timelines, and details. Yet the weight of closure felt unbearably heavy. Justice, though necessary, could never replace the laughter that once filled their homes, or the dreams that would now go unfulfilled. But even in their sorrow, they found strength in the memory of those they lost. Their voices rose for change, for awareness, for vigilance, ensuring no future disappearance would ever be dismissed or ignored again. The community, bruised and fractured, began to rebuild itself piece by fragile piece, learning to trust again, to walk their streets without looking over their shoulders, and to honor the lives stolen by a man who once walked among them unseen. The woods grew silent once more, but this time the silence carried stories of resilience, unity, and the courage of those who refuse to let the darkness win. And as the sun rises over the town each morning, it becomes a reminder that even in the places where shadows once hid a monster, light can still return. The vanished may be gone, but their memories endure, guiding every effort to protect those who remain. Their legacy stands as a warning, a lesson, and a promise. The community will never again turn a blind eye, and the hidden monster who preyed on the innocent will never be allowed to return.